I think the challenges of automation are coming faster and faster. The machine, in the environment of the machine, will always be superior. If you're playing in the machine, then of course the machine always wins. To have a skill takes years. A process, a methodology. I think for me, if students can take one thing from the universe, that's the methodology.
On this episode of the Design Podcast, Lefteris Heretakis. Lefteris is a designer and a lecturer in visual communication design. He is currently teaching design at the Izmir School of Design. Lefteris has a depth of education spanning from the Royal College of Art, Kingston University, U Creative, Leeds Beckett University, and Bath Spa University. Lefteris has extensive knowledge and experience and is currently specializing in branding and publishing. You can find Lefteris across a wide range of social media, ranging from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Behance, and so many more. Lefteris and I have a depth of discussion on design education, and we hone in on the importance of methodology, and so much more. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Designed Podcast. Lefteris, welcome to the Designed Podcast. How are you?
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, we're glad to have you. I'm sure you got some great stuff to share with us today. You're over in London, if I'm correct?
Right now, I am traveling. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right now, I'm traveling. Right now, I'm in Izmir.
Okay. All
yes,
right.
Yes.
Moving around. That's
Yes,
important,
yes.
staying active. So tell us a little bit about you and your path through design and into academia, if you will.
Oh, yes, of course. I started off as a musician. I was a violinist. For many, many, many years.
Okay.
And at 17, I realized that I don't want to be stuck in a room for 6 hours practicing, because I found myself be more social, and musicians tend to hang out with musicians, and so the life you live, it tends to be very different. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to start in the art. I mean, I was drawing anyway before, but there's a very strong link between art and music. So I started out, I went to England. I did a foundation in what is now U Creative in Maidstone.
Okay.
And then I sort of did it in a very intense year, which was actually one of the most intense years of my studies. I applied for illustration at Kingston. Those days was a fantastic place. I went to Kingston. I worked as an illustrator. Then I did the master's at the Royal College of Art. Then I went into sort of various, again, advertising, design. For me, illustration was not enough. I wanted to expand. I wanted to do more, to see who's commissioning the illustrator, so the art director role. So I went through many roles. Because of my master's, I did a specialism in graphic design, and through advertising, and then through self-publishing. Had a self-publishing company. And about 10 years ago, I started teaching in Leeds.
Okay.
So when I sort of started teaching in Leeds, I realized that I almost didn't recognize the climate.
Yes.
About 10 years, good 10 years had passed since I graduated from my degree. So I found myself to be in a very different environment to the one I was as a student. It took me a while to get my bearings. I think in the beginning, it takes a couple of years to develop a good confidence in the material and the delivery, sort of. And then I realized that the students and me were not seeing the same thing. So when I was giving feedback, some of the students, although they were looking at we were looking at the same thing, they were not seeing the same thing. And so I began to see that it was a issue of drawing, hand-heart-eye coordination. And what we were taught at Kingston is direct observational drawing. A special practice that heightens the observation skills, and basically trains the student towards objective looking, rather than looking from their imagination.
Okay.
So I started a long journey through a teaching qualification as well that I got from Leeds, which were very good, postgraduate diploma in higher education, which really sort of helped me adjust my teaching towards a more student-centered approach as I realized I needed to feel the class to see what level I would teach, or to fill any gaps, or to cover any ground that might be missing from the particular cohort.
Okay.
And then sort of I progressed in my teaching, and so here I am.
So how many years do you have teaching now?
I'm celebrating 10 years of teaching this September.
Oh, that's fantastic. Got the decade under your belt. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Not yet, but very soon. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a good milestone. I'm about 11 years, I think, is what I'm at. Without doing some quick math, that's where I think I'm at. So about the same. We entered around the same time then. So what areas have been your favorite?
Well, I started as a illustration leadership sort of role. I mean, which I still have. But I found that teaching visual communication design, because this is where I've been teaching what we used to call it, like graphic design, illustration, digital media. Some call it different. It comes under different names.
Yeah.
Visual communication design courses tend to be the most challenging and the most tricky to teach, because when the student is very clear about what they've come to learn, they're also clear about where to focus. But when we're teaching sort of 5 or 6 disciplines, so really, for me, it's basically studio. It's more of the Bauhaus sort of model, that there is studio and everything is around studio. When things became modular, they were to the detriment of the student, because that modularized things in their mind as well. Whereas actually, teaching is not modular; it's studio, and anything that can help the studio progress.
So you're kind of referring down to how they've made the blocks of time, right? Where they've dedicated like the 2.5, 3 hours for lecture studio class versus like the all day, you go in and you just work in the studio and you study and you make work and you critique work. The older approach gave a much better and clearer idea of what design is to the student. Mm-hmm. Now they compartmentalize everything. That's very true, especially as you start naming each one of these little components. It's like, well, this is a different thing, and it's like, well, it's not that different. The process is the same. We're just talking about a different format or a different medium or something like that. So that's a great segue then, Lefteris, right into that big question that these Prologue episodes are talking about, is the state of design education. So what are your thoughts on the state of design education? And I would love to hear if you think that there's a variation or similarities between an education in the States versus abroad.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the privilege of doing research in Europe, extensive research in Europe. I don't have direct experience of the US. I've heard what some schools are doing, and it sounds amazing. So I cannot talk about the US directly. I have great experience in England. I have done a lot of work in Poland. Okay. I've done some work in Spain, in Holland, in Turkey as well. So
I'll add that component then of reflection on how that compares then to the studies that are happening in the States from my perspective.
Yeah, of course. I think that any country that does not teach design separate to art is on a good path. What tends to happen in many schools is we've cut off design from art. So by cutting it off, the students cannot follow where this is coming from. I mean, I'm teaching sort of a link for example, for design, a couple of 200 years timeline. And of course, before in history of art in Gombrich and Shock of the New, and all these things. But when you are cut off from the timeline, and there is a very strange and interesting break in the late 70s, early 80s, when the computers started coming in, and sort of I don't think we knew what to do with them. And what we did was we threw out printmaking, we threw out sort of letterpress, we threw out hot metal type. And now we seem to realize, hey, we need that thing. But most of the hot metal type has been recycled. A lot of the wood blocks have been gone to dustbin. So I think it's only recently that we're realizing that we need both the physical and the digital, and how that can be combined.
I agree.
So any education that teaches, in Poland is fantastic, because they start from fine art. So they start from fine art, and they enter as fine artists, and then they specialize. Some schools, of course, forget to change the mindset.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure, yeah.
So that creates some challenge, but the core, the core of the issues is that they teach design connected to the arts, connected to the drawing, connected to the hand-heart-eye coordination skills. And because the main question for me is, how do we handle the changes that are coming out through artificial intelligence and through all these sort of issues?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And of course, is to go to the ability. Paul Rand says, what distinguishes from a cow is our hands, that we use our hands. So it's, the more we train our hands, the more we use our hands, it's hand-heart-eye coordination. It doesn't matter if it's physical or digital. Some of my students have done some amazing drawings on the iPad, which would have needed a full-fledged studio of acrylics and brushes and paints and Procreate or any sort of other software on the iPad is tremendous. Or tablets.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple side questions to that.
Of course.
Then. So our university, we have all of our students come in as BA students in studio arts.
Brilliant.
And they have to, at the end of their sophomore year, they have to pass a review. They have a live presentation where they put up 10 to 12 of their works, and they have to speak about their works. And these are students who, they will have intro to graphic design, because intro to graphic design is a course for all of our majors in our art department. So they'll present and they pass that, right? Some may not. Some may need to, do some refinement and represent. But once they pass that, only then can they decide if they want to be a Bachelor of Fine Art, a BFA applicant. And once they get approved to be a BFA applicant, only then can they choose their area of emphasis, in my case, which would be the graphic design emphasis.
Fantastic.
So it's
that sounds extremely healthy.
Yes, yeah. So reflect on that a little bit. How does that...
I think that's exactly how it should be done. Yeah. And I think that not many schools are doing it like that these days. Most schools are going directly into design. In some countries, they don't even regard foundation as necessary anymore, which is like, because which is a bit shocking. They sort of they said do some whatever you can and come in. So it's exactly that emphasis on rigor and selection.
Yeah, I was talking to Diane Gibbs in the last podcast, and
yes, I watched it. It was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Diane's wonderful. She made a comment that what she would like to see differently is intro to graphic design at a freshman level. What are your thoughts on that? Where's a good entry point? Like, we've talked a little bit about foundations. We're talking a little bit about the graphic design area, and we're talking about having a solid arts foundation. So what does that foundation look like in your point of view then?
The foundation for today, or the interdisciplinary, or the interdisciplinary, you mean?
Yeah, I think interdisciplinary, kind of what your vision might be. I mean, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because foundations is something I want to talk about as well.
Okay. I mean, the foundation is I think the most important year in a student's career. I think for me it was the most. It had an incredible foundation. It's the most rigorous. It was exhausting.
Yes. And you're wondering what's coming next. But it's extremely
important of going through the various disciplines that are available to you.
Correct.
Later on degree level, I think it's really important to emphasize more on interdisciplinary collaboration. So, if there's an art school with a university, then we can, the collaborations with various other disciplines like sort of psychology, economics, or to complement projects.
Yes.
I mean, for some branding projects, we've collaborated with psychology department. For some business projects, you collaborate with economics or marketing departments. So, because the knowledge has expanded so much these days that it's very hard for one person to cover everything. And for example, it takes much longer for a designer to create a business plan than an economy student. So
that's true. Yeah,
it's very interesting, and I think the future of education lies in the interdisciplinary collaborations. However, the emphasis needs to be on the skills primarily, and that's what you should be doing.
Okay. What do those skills look like? I remember listening to Gary Rosance in a episode of Design EDU Today, and they talked about the importance of skill sets when students go to present their portfolios. So what do you think are the most important skill sets that we should be working on before they get into their advanced design classes?
For what purpose? For what skill sets?
That's a good question. Yeah. I guess it's going to vary depending on what area of graphic design they want to get into. If it's traditional, if it's screen based, if it's UX, UI,
I mean,
it changes
if you're talking about professional skills,
basic design skill sets that they need to look at.
Okay, then the basic design skills, of course, again, we're going back to drawing. We're going back to being able to see rather than look, to be able to see things as tone, line, shade, color, texture.
That's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Rather than seeing things as cloth or glass.
Yeah. That's one of my. Well, that is the first assignment I have in Intro to Graphic Design. I have them find an image, an animal, an object, utilitarian kind of object, and a piece of food, and I have them draw it first. And a lot of students are like, "Well, I can't draw," and I'm like, "Well, I don't want you to draw. I don't care if you can draw. What I want you to do is see it. Exactly. I want you to see it." And then we break it down into high contrast and a geometric, and I have them use line shape, in space, and figure out what does that represent if it was just a black and white. And we talk about geometric, and that moves us into, well, how does that reflect to a logo, or how does that reflect to typography? And then we reflect on, well, what does that mean in a composition then? How do we break that down into just formal space in a composition? So yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that.
I think the drawing is also the fact that when one comes from a point of not knowing, and this is the wonderful thing about drawing, is that it can position oneself at the point of I don't know what it is, and I want to explore and find and discover. Yes, and that's what sort of. Even though photography is fantastic and very useful, and I'm a big advocate, that's where it differs more. That it allows more time to discover.
Yeah. So in that matter, you talked a little bit about blocks versus longer periods of time. What would you see as a structure you'd like to see us change from the 2.5, 3 hour long classes to something? So you're talking more.
Student contact time has decreased.
Yes.
So student contact time has decreased. I mean, in my education, we've had about 40 hours a week of contact, not teaching, but contact. Also, more access to time for studios. I mean, if studios can be open for 24 hours, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And there are some universities that do that. Not kicking students out. But in some countries and in some universities, contact time has been greatly reduced. And there is a certain amount of time that a designer needs to become a designer. It's not a quick process. There are courses, for example, that you can do it for shorter, but the time is necessary.
Yeah. Do you think? The number of students per class is problematic?
Yes.
Do you think it's problematic now, or?
It depending on the university. I mean, when it goes above 16 per 16 students per lecture, it gets tricky.
Yeah, I remember at my previous university prior to University of Central Arkansas, I had 24 students per class, and it was extremely difficult because I had to explain to them, if I'm going to stop and see everyone during this less than 3 hour time, you literally have 3 minutes for me to sit down in front of you, for you to tell me what you're working on, for me to give you some quick feedback, to go through all 24 of those students during our studio time, literally just gave them moments of interaction with me. And that was really tough for me to do because I wanted to give them more. So it is very difficult. Yeah.
Of course. Depending on the university.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you've already mentioned this, so let's talk about this a little bit more. The idea of art and design, or art versus design.
Okay. I mean, art is where design has always been inspired from. We're living, of course, in a time now where there's multiple sources of inspiration. But the knowledge of the history of art and the knowledge of the history of design is essential, because our job is to remix and recycle and reuse things and ideas. Yeah. And if these ideas are not well known to the students, it becomes more difficult for them.
And if you think about the definition of what design is, right? And I think the biggest differentiation is that it's a plan to solve a problem.
I like Paul Rand's definition.
Yeah, and that is?
Design is the method of putting form and content together.
I like that as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah. And if we wanted to talk about form, we need to continue talking a little bit about foundations. And foundations is so critical to design. And like you said, it's unfortunate to see some schools where the foundations in arts just isn't there. So what do you see as being untouchable in foundations? Like what should never change?
My experience of foundation, it's a very, very long time ago, so I have not been in foundation for a long time.
Yeah.
I think foundation is about getting the student through the various disciplines in the area so they can make a more informed choice. This is what it was about. So we get definitions. We're on the same page with the definitions. It was about getting through the various disciplines so that then we could make a more informed choice.
Yeah.
But of course, disciplines change. But the fundamental disciplines don't. For example, we might come up with all these new names for design, and user experience, user interface. But design is design.
Yeah,
that doesn't change. So realizing, but that comes later. I think that comes later.
Yeah. So what would you bring to foundations to make a little bit of a change? What do we need progressively going forward as we look at the state of design education? We want to, it's changing. We know it's changing. We know that our young designers are being asked more when they graduate, to do more, to be more diverse, so on and so forth. What would you add to foundations that makes that more applicable to what the students' needs are today?
I don't think the foundations need to change. The foundations are very necessary, and I think that students must go through foundation, even if they have the choice not to. I mean, we can talk more about the degree area, because the foundation is fine.
Yeah.
But more about the future proofing of education. So that's something else.
Okay, elaborate on that then, if you.
Yeah, I mean, the future proofing is not playing. The machine in the environment of the machine will always be superior.
Okay.
If you're playing in the machine, then of course the machine always wins.
Okay. I think I know what you're referring to, and you can elaborate on that. I show students that shiny box, right? Intro to graphic design. I'm like, there it is. That's your moment. That's your moment of glory. Everyone wants to get on the machine and start making things. Teach me Illustrator. Teach me Photoshop. Teach me InDesign. I want to make things. But that is only a tool. Yes. And that tool doesn't make work, right? Our minds create. Our minds think. And that shiny box is simply just a a path through our expression.
Yes.
We have to know what we want to express before we can make it, before we can ask that box to do certain things.
Yes, and also emphasis on abilities, on real skills. Some students want to just watch quick YouTube videos, where to have a skill takes years to acquire a skill that you can actually sell. So emphasis on the students having something to exchange, having a skill to exchange.
Yeah.
Because a process, a methodology. I think for me, if students can take one thing from the university, that's the methodology of being able to tackle any brief, of being able to handle anything, regardless of how they're feeling. Because professionalism, again, there are many areas we can touch upon. But for me, the methodology, if they can break the brief down and analyze it, work with it, and have skills that can really make it something different.
Okay.
And those skills that can be exchanged as well for work.
I completely agree. The methodology and the process that you go about through to come up with the solution to the problems. So what does the curriculum then look like for you and your university? What kind of class structure do they have? What's the sequence that they go through?
I mean, visual communication courses tend to be, if we talk about the 4-year degree, tend to be 3 years exploration and 1 year specialism in general outline.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So I mainly focus on year 3. I mean, year 2 is more general design and going through the various motions. Year 3 for me is sequential thinking. So being able to create stories, to tell stories, and how that can be implemented through the various media. But basically the storyboarding, the storytelling ability, ability.
What do those look like as far as projects go for you in one of your courses?
Well,
can you walk me through?
Actually, we're working a lot with the Royal Society of Arts in London. Those are fantastic projects.
Yeah.
We're working with DNAD. So we try to have either real briefs or competitions that are live, because that creates a greater excitement.
So are those handled in the classroom? Are those like the competitions
in the studio?
Yeah. So you kind of break them up into different groups, and each group.
Yes, depending on the complexity of the project.
Okay, or it could be individual students against
it can be
each
individual
other.
Students. We prefer to be individual students, but if we feel that the work is too complicated or it needs to be broken up into, we don't have that kind of a time frame to complete it, then of course it's broken up into groups.
How does that competition add to the accomplishments of the work or the level of the work? Do you feel that it's different, of higher quality, when you have that type of one, the real world kind of application, and secondly, having them as you say, kind of compete, whether it's individual groups?
I don't believe in competition. Everybody's individual, but what the competition gives is a framework for them to create a better portfolio piece. And of course, we have some wacky briefs as well. We throw, but the competition, especially for example, something like the RSA, competitions that have been running for many decades, are very precious because they're very well written, they're very well structured, and the students are competing in an international environment, so it's quite an intense time.
Okay, can you give me an example of one that was like among your most memorable from that?
Well, the RSA is a lecture, it's a 3-minute lecture usually.
Okay.
Academic lecture, and so they have to convert those words, sounds into images.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And so we're going through the various techniques of animation, various techniques of motion graphics, and through that we teach all the other kinds of work in that.
Oh, okay. That sounds really interesting. So, as we head into the next years of developing curriculum and trying to address the changes that are coming, what do you see important for us to address 1 year from now? What do you see important for us to address 5 years and even 10 years out?
I think, as I said, the way that the students teaching the students to see doesn't change.
Right.
So developing students that can coordinate their thinking, their emotions, and their seeing, and really sort of control everything. That, of course, it has the foundation of drawing.
Okay. What do you think is going to be a big thing 5 years? Maybe not a big thing, but something that we need to recognize and address now.
I think the challenges of automation are coming faster and faster.
Okay, I would agree with that.
So, looking into Adobe Sensei, looking into Adobe Spark, it's quite sort of,
I heard someone make an argument. It wasn't an argument to or for the automation of software, but they talked a bit about how some people see it as a crutch to design, but other people say, well, the designer still has to be able to see and interpret to use the tool, because the tool's there, but you still have to understand what it is that you want to express.
But once you see some kinds of what Adobe Sensei is doing, and or you throw in the words and images, and it creates 10 alternative layouts.
Yeah. Does that so that's avoiding the cookie cutter problem, with templates and different blocks of information.
It's not a template, it's just doing it. It's kind of
interesting. Yeah. I haven't dabbled much with that myself. So I think that might be something I should. I
think it's about having being able. I want them to be able to talk about design, them being able, because when they go to a company with a professional for a professional interview, they're going to want to talk about their passions and their typefaces and their methodology. They need to be able to talk about it, and when they are developing a greater insight into that, then that, of course, is future-proofing them, because then they can do something else. Then they can find another way. Right.
And that's also going to add to their ability to, when they're using these automated tools, to know when something's just not right.
Absolutely.
Where they can say, well, that was nice that suggested I do this, but that's not designed
and
well.
Also having the being brave enough to follow really their passion, and that's what very few schools do. I think a lot of schools actually curate the final show. And they actually tell students how to design. And there are very few schools that actually take the risk. And thank God I've always taught in schools like that actually will take the risk of, the show not looking so curated and so fancy, but when it comes together and the student goes and follows their passion,
well, I'll say
it works really well.
I agree, because I'll say I'm very fond, very passionate. I adored, loved my undergraduate studies. But it was in my senior year that I've kind of took a step back and was like, well, they're kind of telling me how to design. And as long as I do it the way that they're telling me, they're going to enjoy it. And I noticed some other students that were doing what they wanted to do. And I noticed that they were being told, well, that's not good design. So I found that rather interesting. So now me as an academic, I'm not trying to teach them what to design or how to design. I'm trying to talk to them about methodologies, process.
Absolute process, absolutely.
How do they interpret? What's their aesthetic? What's their style? Because I don't want a cookie cutter, design that looks like something I've done. Because at least straight on
employment.
Yeah.
I mean, 40% of Behance portfolios look pretty much identical. And
very true.
Yeah, as an art director, I would have trouble picking about 40% of portfolios I see today. It's a pretty conservative number, but coming out and having the conviction. So, but that comes from good education. That comes from having the conviction from your education, from having the security from your education.
Yeah.
And if your education was like express kind of course, that just rush through everything, then of course you're not going to have the confidence.
I agree. And with those 40%, like you said, I always talk to students and I show them Pinterest and Dribbble and Behance, and I'm like, look at all this beautiful work. And they're like, wow, I'll never be that good. And then I said, you need to pause for a minute and you need to look at that work and then you ask yourself, analyze.
Exactly.
Is it solving a problem or is it just pretty work?
Eye candy.
Yeah. And pretty work will not get you employed. Being able to think will get you employed and have innovative solutions, to way to express and a way to solve those problems.
Absolutely.
What about 10 years? Can we see that far ahead and kind of look at what that might be in 10 years?
I think no, because I think the world is changing so much and so fast. I think, we revise things every year or every 6 months, we improve things, but no, I think it's too far.
Yeah. And we see tools and solutions come and go. I think about the first one that comes to my mind, unfortunately, is like Adobe Muse. How that was supposed to be a big answer to that kind of automated plug and play portfolio.
A lot of the community was very upset though, because it had some incredible features about it.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
A lot of the community feels that it was a mistake for Adobe to actually axe Adobe Muse, who actually were very shocked because they had created some. If we're going to talk about software in Adobe, there is a.
Yeah.
I mean, what about the shift button in CC, in Photoshop? That was like. We're going into some other discussion. We're talking about Adobe and for software and shortcuts and how the shortcuts are not the same. But that's
right.
How the command place is different in Illustrator and in design. But that's a different discussion.
There could be a whole discussion series on stuff like that for sure. Let's talk about advice, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm just starting out and I'm so eager to become a design educator,
design educator or designer?
Design educator. So you and I both remember those moments when we were young designers and we made that shift to become design educators, and the thrill that was behind that to see the students grow and prosper. I still talk about that aha moment, when you're teaching and you see a student, you're like, oh, you're so close, and then they just go, oh, it feels so rewarding. So there's designers out there that are making that shift, or young designers that are going to just enter into design education. Advice for those folks just joining this wonderful career of design education.
That's the first time I've been asked this question. It's a very nice question. Okay, I think one needs experience before they go. I mean, it's our field is not one that you can just graduate and sort of, go. You have got to go through the motions of industry.
Okay.
So it's something that if you haven't swam in the ocean, then it's very difficult to actually have a living experience of it.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
That experience. I mean, I'm still a designer, so I mean, I'm still sort of having projects, and I want to be in the design, because if I'm not swimming again, I will have nothing to report back. So I'm taking on as many design projects as possible. To be able to be current and to be able to handle things and to be able to report back, into the studio with conviction, rather than talk about things that were in the past. Right.
I think that's the majority of design educators. I know there are some out there that are not, and they're research based, and they want to stay with,
of course,
that type of approach. So as a young, if they haven't had the experience, if they haven't been out there designing, for a firm, an agency, freelance, or in some capacity, would that be your first advice then? It's like, well, spend some time in the professional world first,
and then
join, and then come back.
Absolutely,
in.
Have an experience, and also checking their motives.
Okay,
because it's not. It's something that why they're doing it.
Okay,
this is the motive is very important.
Yeah, what's a dangerous motive? Putting you on the spot.
It's a dangerous motive. I think that it's a kind of a sacrificial job, isn't it? It's like how the candle burns in a way to give off the light. So it's a kind of a sacrificial job. It's not, it's just checking the motives really before they go into it.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. So you're going to say, yeah.
And also, what really helped me a lot. I mean, okay, colleagues, but teaching qualification. I cannot stress that enough.
Say that again?
No, teaching qualification.
Ah, okay, sure.
A good teaching qualification, so that they know, because not every good designer is a good lecturer. In fact, I think, again, I'm going back to Paul Rand, because he's the greatest example of an incredible designer and an incredible lecturer.
Yeah.
And these things are very rare.
Yes.
So not everybody's cut out to be a lecturer. So the motives, do you enjoy the real design world and sort of want to be there? Just the real motives inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I like that too. How about advice for design educators that are preparing their students to hit that professional career? What advice would you give
for students? You mean advice for students?
Well, we'll touch on students too, but also
right.
I was thinking about for design educators, advice for them for preparing students for success.
I think apprenticeships is I would say,
Okay.
It's like preparing students, giving them the skills to be able to work for the best, even for free for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that is like the most invaluable thing. Getting apprenticeships as often as possible, or as much as possible, during summer breaks, or during, for me, I was doing apprenticeships throughout as a student, and that's what really helped me understand where I am.
Okay. Do you think those experiences should be diverse for them? Do you think they should be encouraged to find something that's local in their own community, or do you think they need to travel to a different city?
They need to go for the best, wherever that is.
Go for the best. Okay.
And compete, because of course, if you have a studio or an agency, of course there's going to be 1,000 people wanting to work for free. So how do you get through that?
That's an excellent one. So any students that are listening or watching the podcast, advice for them?
The same, apprenticeships. It's like getting into the real world. Do not go freelance. As when you graduate, it's a big mistake. You've got to work 4 or 5 years for a company. Realize how the company works. Have a mentor. I think students these days go to freelance too early, and
they're all eager.
They don't understand the complexity of it.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The complexity behind working with clients through the process and answering their giving an answer to their problem, because
Absolutely.
if you don't succeed, you're not going to continue to succeed. So you have to understand the diversity and the challenges, the hurdles, the complexity to that.
Absolutely. People now need mentoring throughout. I mean, mentoring and is essential.
Right. But even when it comes down to trying to price a project, that's like a whole nother college degree if you wanted to, it's complex. It's complex. Yeah. So what have you been working on professionally, academically? What do you got coming up?
Okay. Well, I'm continuing my research on design education, and I have developed a very special course. It's called Advanced Drawing Practices, where we really sort of talk about looking and drawing.
Okay.
The most important thing I have right now is a conference in the Valencia area for the last week of November on design education. So we're putting together a conference.
Okay. I think I've seen that, actually.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Putting together a conference for the end of November in the area of Valencia. I think it's going to be now 3 days.
Okay. And that's in Spain, correct?
That's in Spain. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is in Spain.
And what's the main
focus?
Focus. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the focus is at a lot of design education conferences. What happens is people say certain things, and then they go back to their work, and just everything is the same.
Yeah.
But we need things that people can apply today.
Yes. Yeah.
Today, very practical advice about design education. Examine it and talk about it, and hopefully we're going to have some fantastic speakers.
Yeah.
And so it's really getting it practical.
Yeah. That sounds really interesting for sure. And hopefully you get a good representation of all the different forms or styles, if you will, of
yes.
of design education. Because it's like we've talked already, it varies, right? You can go to two different universities in the same city and have two complete
it's all about the people
approaches.
that are teaching.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you think that so when I talk to students who want to go on for their master's degree, I always tell them, look and see what the faculty are doing and what they're into. Where's their creative activity? What's their process? What defines them? Because that will typically be the study that you're going to partake in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is that, and I know that will happen for even 4-year undergraduate degrees. And so I don't think there's much differentiation there. But how much do we need to pay attention to us getting caught in that trap of, well, this is my favorite thing, so this is what I'm going to teach you? Should we avoid that? Or
is this a question for design educators or for students?
Yeah. For design educators, as we're working in our universities and trying to bring that diverse amount of study, can we get caught up, and I do believe it happens, in teaching what we love and not teaching the skill sets, if you will, right? That broad knowledge, that methodology.
It's a very interesting question. I mean, for me, there's only one methodology. That's design methodology. I went to a very, very good illustration course, yet I learned skills myself. I mean, I learned drawing, but anything else additional, there was no time. Of course, students need to realize that the learning is out there and they need to take ownership of it. Yeah. The university is about giving the framework, of course, giving the methodology, applying the methodology. It's like, the map is not the territory. We give them a map. We give them a methodology written, but until they get to know and use the methodology. It's really one design methodology we're teaching.
Yes.
In everything.
Yeah. So students need to be aware not to get caught up in the passions or the expertise of the faculty, if you will, and realize that there's still the methodology even behind what they're looking at. And students need to think about, well, how do I think about the method that they're doing and not the what it is, the visuals that they're creating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And linking the learning to the real world, because the real world is really important. So getting to know where design is at the moment, and how what they are doing has a reference to the real world, and the expectations are continuously getting higher.
Yeah, and then that interprets into what they create, into their visuals, into their aesthetic. I'm sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I really enjoy that. Is there anything else that you got going on in the background, or just
no, not for the next 6 months.
Big focus on that conference.
Big focus on the conference, because that's we're trying to make it original. Make the original conference, and there's coming from the love of education, really, just about the love of education.
I can't complain with that at all, and that's where I'm at. That's where I find the most enjoyment. It's being in that classroom. Yes, I miss being a full-time designer, sort of. Like you said, always need to create, always want to keep creating. But man, stepping in that room and working with the young people and seeing that energy, hopeful energy, because there's those moments where you're like, come on guys, let's all wake up. I know it's early in the day here, it's 10 a.m., but we've got to put on our creative hats here. But
absolutely.
And then that aha moment, and you see it come together is just so rewarding. So any of our listeners and viewers, if they want to find out more about you, what where can they find you? How can they connect with you? Where would you like to send them?
We're going to put some links underneath. I mean, my main website is heretakis.com, but
excellent.
Yeah. I mean, if one Googles my name, there are quite a few links that
Yeah. It's amazing, right? In this world today, it's like, well, just run it through Google and it'll tell you everywhere I am, right? It'll tell you if I'm here, there, or anywhere. So that's fantastic. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that we didn't talk about that you really would love to add?
We covered a tremendous amount of material.
Yeah. I think
again, Paul Rand, he said everything, but design needs to be out of love and not out of any ulterior motive. Just to quote him again, it's got to be produced out of love and not out of an ulterior motive.
Yeah,
because it's not about we have to realize that today in the world, profit is a result, not a target. It's not an aim. We cannot aim for profit. Profit is a result while we're doing something out of love.
Yeah. If your passion is there and if your love is in there and you're putting it into the work,
as a general
you
message,
will profit. You will profit from that in more ways than just financially.
Of course.
Lefteris, this has been a great conversation.
Oh,
I really appreciate your time. I don't know what time it is over where you're at.
It's 5:30.
Oh, it's not too bad.
20 to 6. That's perfect.
Not too bad. Right. Just the morning over here, so the evening over there.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, again, Lefteris, thank you so much. I really appreciate our conversation.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So let's continue doing good work and let's keep creating success in design education.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much.
Have a wonderful day.
I will. And you as well. We'll talk with you soon.
Of course. Take care.
All right. Bye. Thank you for joining me on this episode. The Designed Podcast website is located at thedesignedpodcast.com. There you can find notes on the episode, links to our guests, links to resources, and more regarding the many things discussed during each show. If you find the Design Podcast interesting and informative, please subscribe on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast service. You can also follow the Design Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our video version of the podcast on YouTube. Please join us for the next episode of the Design Podcast, and let's continue to create success in design education.